Danny, welcome by force or by volunteering. Either way, you're here.
There's gunpoint there.
Yeah, there actually is a gun off camera. Yes, don't tell them about it. This is my podcast that I've started, and I actually want it to be an interview-based podcast regardless. I'll do my own videos here and there, but the focus of it for me is actually interviewing people and chatting with people, because I have amazing friends like yourself who are all in the arts, and why not use ye to my advantage and monopolise on it and make a load of money from it?
Dead or right, like.
No, but why not actually take advantage of having all these artists around me that we can discuss art about, because, you know.
Absolutely, someone's got to do it, like.
Yeah, God knows we love yapping anyway.
We love to yap.
It is called Podcast in an Art Studio, but this is a special one, I suppose, where it's actually a podcast in an art gallery. We're here in the Lavit Gallery in Cork, and this is your show Beyond I See, which actually is the last day it's going to be up.
Last day it's up, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be taking it down after this, so it's great to have last final documentation of it.
And you have to take it all down today?
I'm going to take it all down today, yeah. I think a one piece sold, so I'm going to leave that here, and
Okay.
100%, so it should be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Luckily, these things come down easier than they go up.
That's true. And then you have to figure out storage.
That's it. That's my next thing. A big mat in my studio, I'd say, will help. Just walk over it. Might make it better.
Okay, so I thought just to begin and give a refresher on who you are, how you got here, how this work came to be. I'll give a quick kind of debrief just about your work, so, you know, sit tight and bear with me. Try not to be too mortified.
How could you say that?
And if I get anything wrong, let me know, of course.
No problem.
As a part of the Cork Arts Society Student of the Year exhibition, sponsored by Baker Tilly Accountants, the Lavit Gallery presents this brilliantly unique solo show titled Beyond I See by my extraordinarily talented peer and good friend, Danny Foley. The Student of the Year award was initiated in 1967 by Cork Art Society, now trading as the Lavit Gallery, with sculptor John Burke as the first recipient and subsequent awardees including Maud Cotter, Ailish O'Connell and Vivian Roach. I myself was lucky enough to be the recipient of this award in 2024, and it is nothing short of an honour to have Danny take up the baton the following year. Danny Foley is an Irish artist currently based in Backwater Artist Group Studios in Cork City. Foley recently graduated from MTU Crawford College of Art and Design with a first-class honours degree in fine art. In addition to receiving the Student of the Year award from the Lavit Gallery, Foley has also received several other awards, including the Backwater Artist Group Moving Image Residency, the Thesis Award and Sample Studios Network Award, to name but a few. His work has been purchased by Cork City Council, Cork County Council, Eli Lilly and the MTU Arts Office. Recent exhibitions include group shows at Goma, Waterford, the James Barry Exhibition Centre, Cork, the 1111 Gallery and Mamu Gallery in Budapest, with another upcoming solo show in the Studio 12 Gallery here in Cork later this year. Regarding his practice and work, we of course have the opportunity to hear straight from the horse's mouth. The artist is here.
Right, horse.
I thought it's better to actually hear that part.
My voice is quite hoarse as well, which is perfect.
It's going to sound great.
100%.
So Danny, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thanks for coming on. And I thought we'd get straight into the questions. And I wanted to start with the title. I thought it was a really unusual title. The spelling is interesting. And what inspired the title, and what does it mean for you in the breadth of the work?
Yeah, that's very interesting. The title of the work, I always find titles very tricky. I don't know if you find this yourself.
Yes,
but I find titles very, very tricky with my work in particular, because I often find myself trying to draw from so many different sources, be it like literary references or something to do with the work itself. Strangely enough, this title actually came before the work, which is, I think, very odd.
Yeah, that is odd.
That I always think, like, that always, for me, tells me, like, there really isn't kind of a formula for what comes first, I don't think.
That's true.
But no, the title came before the actual show, and I think the Beyond I See, it kind of makes reference to a lot of things. For one, it's a bit of a trick, like kind of like spelling, like the I is like the human eye and the sea is kind of referring to the ocean.
Yeah.
The reason for that was, I might need to actually talk a little bit about like where the inspiration behind the show kind of began.
Please.
And that was, I'd finished my degree show and I was exploring the role of shape-shifting and kind of navigating ecological questions, relationships of humans to non-humans, so that coexistence, but also through a kind of mythic kind of lens as well. And I was doing this through a process that kind of required me to not actually predict an image to make the work. So I kind of couldn't have see what the final outcome or predict it too much so before it was made. So the work is kind of always in that process of discovery. Then, for this show, I'd actually received an email from someone who was really concerned about a real ecological problem, particularly in Cork at the minute, which is the overfishing of sea sprat, particularly in Bantry. And the person who emailed me spoke so beautifully about the problem, about the significance of something so seemingly insignificant, something so small, like a sprat, but in a culmination with many sprat and the kind of knock-on effects they have as a keystone species in our marine environments. Our whale populations depend on them, seabird populations, other fish, and even tourism for the ocean as well. So it's all kind of affected. So this is then where I was like, okay, how can this process begin to navigate this kind of ocean, marine environment world? I felt a bit like I was kind of questioning, like I don't live by the sea myself, so I was like, okay, do I actually have this personal kind of relationship to this? But then it kind of did force me to reflect a lot of my early memories on, my relationship to the sea and swimming and thinking about, I suppose, the unknowns of the ocean, in that kind of way. I suppose there is also the fact that when you go underwater, there's a lot of unknown. There's that kind of fear when you go underwater, really, where you're like, is there something underneath me? Like, what is that world?
Totally. So it seems to be kind of engaging in, like, I suppose, this like trepidation or this apprehension before you actually maybe experience the thing. Like, even whether it's you were in studio and before you actually see what the work resolves into, there is that moment of what is it going to become?
Exactly.
And this like unfolding, this like foreboding maybe, but possibly in a more positive way. But it's this unknown and curiosity, and even with the sea, like I know I myself have like a terrifying fear of open water. It's exactly that before I know what's in there, that's what freaks me out, is not knowing what's underneath, because it's just so expansive and it just goes down and down and down. Then I suppose also, like, regarding, is it relevant to you personally and not living directly by the sea? I think as Irish people, being on an island, I think it's just part of our identity, regardless if you're physically next to the sea or not. Like, even there I was thinking about people who live in mainland Europe, and if they're travelling to another country, they can get a train, they can get a bus. Kind of no matter what we do, we have to get a plane. Like, we are just totally surrounded by water, so it just naturally becomes a part of our identity. And Crosshaven Beach isn't too far away from us.
And I think that's the thing as well. It forces you to stretch your imagination a little bit. Like, if let's say you don't have that kind of typical, perhaps, that narrative that you feel like, oh, maybe do I have that connection to it? You kind of then stretch your imagination a bit further, of like what is a kind of even more deeper, not necessarily deeper, but I suppose like what's another way of looking at our kind of relation to something aquatic, let's say. I mean, I always think of the human body as a kind of, we're essentially a walking aquarium, really.
Exactly.
We're mostly water ourselves, and there's lots of little microorganisms inside us, on our skin as well. So
totally,
kind of that real idea of like this being more than human. It's not quite necessarily just a kind of like, yes, we inhabit this world that's not just of us, of the human, but also the human is not fully human. Either,
that's true.
Which is kind of interesting.
I also liked what you were saying, that you were inspired by that email that you had gotten, that it was something kind of that you couldn't have predicted. And I thought it was also interesting, because I know even when I did my exhibition here, I had done this very site-specific project about a specific cave up the country. So it was interesting that you also had something very specific you were referring to, which kind of just came out of the blue. And that's kind of how I even felt about the cave, that I came across this book by an archaeologist called Dr. Marion Dowd, and I just suddenly, the work just unravelled from there. So it was nice that you also had something very specific that then turned into this like broader exhibition of work that, it seems specific and ambiguous at once, which is quite interesting. But I wanted to ask you as well, with those themes of marine biodiversity and the sea and the ocean and the unknown and this kind of other world and the other in general, was that always a part of your practice? Like, even with your degree show work, was kind of maritime biodiversity, was that a part of it, or is this something that has emerged since that's kind of newer to your practice?
Yeah, I think my practice initially began always concerning itself, I think, in some way, shape or form, I think, with other life forms. Not specific to the human, but perhaps trying to see the human animality, perhaps, in such a way, trying to relate to something very unfamiliar to perhaps myself as a human being now. There's this kind of sense that the way in which we are taught to be human feels very, how would you say, it doesn't cover all the bases of that experience. So I suppose I've always kind of had this kind of unwavering curiosity of like, what is it like to be something else? Perhaps because there's part of me that feels like a lot of what perhaps might be said about being human is just a little bit oversimplified, or kind of categorized very, very, very rigidly. And I think I find this, especially with all the works that I've been looking at, like David Abram, literary works by him, even John Berger's ways of seeing, and different people writing about like human animality, being like the human is also an animal. It kind of got me thinking a lot about what is intelligence really, like how do we define intelligence? Is it purely a cognitive thing, a memory thing? Then there's creatures that are kind of like, oh, so what is their intelligence? What are they more intelligent than a human at doing? And I always think something that links all of that together for me is like, in art, it comes from the body. It's a bodily intelligence. It doesn't come from this. Like I think a lot of the time when you see these works, or works by artists, sometimes I think the imagination gets a bit too much credit. A lot of the time it is really just you're eating an elephant really. You're kind of starting bit by bit, and you just trust in that kind of that process, that unknown. And in a way, something part of you, it's not even part of you, it doesn't necessarily come from you, it actually comes from somewhere else, something kind of more than human as well. But with regards to the biodiversity, I think that initially stemmed from when I was a child, I used to think I was an animal. And this was, I suppose, recorded by my mum in her studio. Both my parents are artists, so I grew up in their studios, and my mother was doing research on childhood development through psychoanalysis, through people like Donald Winnicott, for example, thinking about play, how play is actually a really serious kind of activity in affirming boundaries, in learning about who we are. And it's interesting how I thought of myself playing as an animal in front of my shadow as well. And then this also kind of created not so much of a, looking at the shadow then, I always think about the cutouts as well. The cutouts are this kind of, or in a way a kind of shadow, like my shadow. There is a kind of ambiguity to them. There's kind of there's a specific thing that they could be something, they could be this, they could be that, but ultimately it's quite ambiguous. And I think then that ambiguity allows for that relational thinking. So it's not that you are thinking, this is that is that, and you're thinking that is separate from me. It's through the ambiguity we can kind of begin to relate. So I suppose in considering the ambiguities around ecology, the ambiguities around other forms of life, those are the things that actually I think help us to relate to them a bit more. So I think, that was a very long-winded answer to a very simple question. I'm very sorry.
Answered so much. That was so good. That was so good. No, I'm so glad you touched on like your mum's work, like Colette's work, because I always thought that was such a fascinating parallel as well, that you were able to kind of at once respond to her work, but also engage in the work for yourself, because it is of you, and in a way there's like an ownership. Like I suppose there is ownership. The work is belong to you also, as well as her, and it's kind of an opportunity for you to kind of speak on it as well, which is interesting. And also, like, that was obviously more relevant, I suppose, to your degree show work, where the video was actually playing, like one of Colette's videos was playing in the space. But here it feels more of maybe expanding on the dialogue, or continuing the dialogue, and maybe understanding it for yourself. Like, what did those shadows mean, and this ambiguity, and the ambiguity within forms, and what we are, and where we end and something else begins, and where that line is, I suppose. And you can see it in all of this work here. And it's very fascinating as well, how the biodiversity comes into it, and the ocean life of, like, I suppose we don't really ever understand fully who we are, what we are, and using something that represents the other so perfectly is a really, really apt image, I suppose. It's something that is terrifying, but it's also fascinating. It taps into some curiosity in us as well. So I just thought it was a really, really interesting decision to make, because also identity is something that artists have explored arguably for all time, like from the first handprint in a cave,
exactly,
to even like this work here. We've always been interested in the self, and what I find fascinating, because for me personally, my work is a lot about the self and identity, and I often explore it through self-portrait, so it's a lot more of a literal sense. But with you, it's so ambiguous, and like you said, there's multiplicities to it, and all these different animals and the self merge. So it's such a unique version of the self that I suppose as an artist, that's the fun of it, that everyone takes these really simple concepts such as who are we, what are we, and it comes up so differently. Like mine, it's very centered around being a woman and exploring different myths and this folklore, but it's very bodied. Like Definitely. There is a physical person standing there. And it's quite narrative based. And then yours, it's just so fluid. And this work especially is so fluid. I feel like everything just blends into each other. So it's also lovely. But I wanted to ask, going back to your mom's influence and her work, and using that in the degree show, that video, how do you think that you have kind of adapted that work? How has that work shifted for you from your degree show, that body of work, to now? Because there's similarities between the two bodies of work, but yet they're different. So I want to know kind of, that jump and the development from your degree show work to now. How do you think the work has kind of changed, or how has it been maybe adapted or evolved?
Definitely. I think my degree show work was a big learning lesson for me. I don't know if you felt the same about your degree show work.
Yes.
I learned a little bit more about my process. Before my degree show, my work was very formulaic. Which for me, I just kept on the kind of same formula of making for a very long time, with kind of the same subject matter. I just kept welding meaning onto something that I actually started to kind of do to death. At least I felt that personally. I think that's something you kind of base off of a feeling. You can kind of sense it in your work when your work starts to become a bit stale, or when you're kind of losing a bit of joy for it. You're just making it because you have to make it. Totally. But for my degree show work, I was really, really worried. I was feeling like, I was failing. I felt like I wasn't making the work that I wanted to make. I didn't know what I wanted to make. I was very indecisive. I was like, I should do this. I was kind of putting all my eggs in all the wrong baskets. For me, I was thinking about really, really kind of non-artistic things, like really just getting bogged down in the technicalities, the fear of not knowing what to do on the day, the fear of not being able to, provide the kind of like the standard, this invisible standard that perhaps maybe was in my head, and then I just gave in. Yeah, I just gave in. I was like, I'm not going to try do all the bells and whistles. That I was trying to do bells and whistles before I even had any work. Before I saw, so it was like I was like, I was just thinking about like all this technical stuff that kind of bounded me before I'd even begun the actual work. So I gave into it, and what I realized is that my work has always been grounded in drawing in some form. And drawing, for me, is quite, like, when I think of drawing, it's a very kind of loose thing. It can tie into painting and sculpture, and it kind of is almost a hybrid between these things. It's almost a link. But my strength had always been drawing. I think through drawing. I think through drawing. I express through drawing, which I kind of stopped doing, weirdly, in fourth year. So then I just gave in. I stopped trying to, we always tie artist jargon initially onto things, or before we actually begin. But I thought, you know what, I'm just going to let it all flow through me. Just let that which is out of my control to flow through me. And I did this first through a stop-motion animation process, which was largely inspired by different artists who I'd looked at, such as like William Kentridge, for example, and his stop-motion drawing films, who's a pivotal influence in my practice, as well. Matt Bollinger's hand-painted stop-motion animations, both very fluid, and it's almost about constructing a film using drawing or paint, but it's unscripted. Yet it appears like it was very thought through, but it's just this trust in this kind of unscripted approach to making. And then this very much influenced then my drawing. I then, in tandem with the animations, start drawing. And then it was like, all of a sudden, I kind of felt like I kind of tapped into a very important realization for me. And this doesn't necessarily feel like this doesn't have to be the way it is for everyone. But for me, like I always used to think of the imagery rather than the work before making it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was always, like it didn't really matter what it was made with or how it was made, it just was an image. Which for me, it worked maybe once or twice, but I was just kind of then not really in my work. I kind of felt a bit distant from it. It felt like something very separate. The process of the stop motion, and not necessarily thinking scriptedly, but kind of like thinking through the work itself, made me think less about an image and more so about this kind of growth, this kind of transformation happening, and kind of working with my instincts, kind of tapping into that kind of a really deep state of this very embodied play, which kind of reminded me a lot of when I was a kid, looking at my shadow with such focus. And I think that's the more interesting thing about those videos that my mum made, was that what I was looking at was, it was while I was in this very deep state of embodied kind of play.
Yeah, and it makes total sense, because I know even as you were saying it even harkened back to like how I felt I was thinking when I was approaching this show last year, where I think it makes sense that you were product orientated, like you were focused on the product, because we had just kind of come out of the machine that was 4 years in university, you know, where each year
I felt I had to go out with a bang, like.
It's a crazy expectation. It is a crazy expectation. And it's also, you're doing it in such short bouts of time. Like now, when I think about a body of work, I'm thinking of it in like a 2 or 3 year cycle. But through college, it's 1 year, less than an actual calendar year.
Absolutely.
Like it's really, really quick timing. So it's no, like for myself and yourself, I don't think it's no surprise that when we approach this show, we were still in that rhythm from university, where it's really product orientated and not process orientated. And it's funny that you mentioned the animation was a way that you found you could kind of tap into breaking that mold a little bit, or feel, specifically you said the word embodied, which is really interesting, because that's what performance was for me. When I came out, I was thinking, okay, I need a really interesting show. I needed to be visually striking. I needed to make my mark. I need to show them that I still have it after the degree show, all these like crazy, like you said, invisible expectations.
How that feels,
And for me, I was like, it was so stifling and so limiting. I felt I was suffocating myself. That whole summer after the degree show, I was really inspired, but I wasn't making. Actually, I had overthought it at the point that it was just, I had stifled the process entirely, because I was so focused on the product. And then I thought, like, fuck it. I have to just do a performance, because I need to do something that engages with the body and not the mind. And my degree show was so theory-based. It was really interlinked with my thesis, and I know your thesis was kind of similar, that it was very involved in the work, and the two went hand in hand. And when you're so up in your mind for an entire year, in such a stressful year as your final year, it's interesting that we both turned to something that was really embodied and of the body. So with you, even the physicality of doing these really large expansive drawings and trying to play with these mediums that are a lot more liquid based, and then also the animation, which was totally intuitive and instinctual, and it was almost like a rejection of thinking. Like you couldn't actually think while you were doing it, because the work was kind of happening for you. And I think that's how I felt with performance, that I'm not going to sit and paint something. I'm not going to paint a figure. I have to become the figure and figure out what it is I actually am feeling and not thinking. So I actually had to physically become the person in the painting, the woman in the painting, when I did that performance in Lady Lazarus, going into the cave and coming out. And
it's amazing.
As an artist, we're all so dramatic and theatrical. I had to cut off my hair while I was at it.
Has to be done, absolutely.
But it really felt necessary, because that mold that you're stuck in after graduating, Jesus, it is.
Absolutely. I was also looking at so many people like yourself now. I did the show after you had your shoot your show, and I was like, oh my god, I have to do this after Lara, and Lara's show was incredible, and I was like, what? Oh no! And it was like, I was literally I was like, oh my goodness, this is gonna be I think just with the side by side of it all, I was just like, oh my goodness, how am I gonna live up? Because it's funny, like for me, hearing you talk about that, like about your worry about it, your stress about it, you know, the similarities of the similar kind of struggle that I suppose all artists go through. Really, it's so funny because I thought like, yeah, the artist has all under control. And it's funny of that kind of front that I think artists are expected to kind of keep up with that.
Everyone has it in control except us, except you know.
Absolutely. And but then when you see actually like get to I suppose the situations like this and artist talks and things like that, you actually really do hear that there is a lot of that kind of doubt, I think, with artists with making. And it is it's just very, I think it's very glorious just how, like, you know, you kind of push through that, how you don't let that doubt kind of impact the work in a negative sense, but actually perhaps you can embrace a little bit of those feelings in order for the work to progress into something, not of your first fixed idea of like, okay, this has to be this before the work is made. Whereas that feeling of doubt actually is like, okay, this is a little bit unfamiliar. It's like walking into the sea, as we said earlier. It's like that feeling of like, okay, this is really uncomfortable. Anything can happen. I could completely drown myself in this. I think once we go to those places of like, okay, once we realize, like, I was so nervous to do that, but if I did anything differently, I would have just kept to my same old habits, kept to my same old comfort space of making, which I think is fine. And you can always go back to it. You can always go back to it, absolutely. So why not use something like this where you have an opportunity to like, and it is in a little way to make your mark, you know, to like literally show a body of work, to express, I suppose, the experience of coming out of education and traversing from being a student to a professional artist. Absolutely. And you have this like platform to be able to show your work, so you might as well be very vulnerable and honest about it, and, you know, actually just make the work that you need to make afterwards, which is often quite loose and embodied. Definitely. And I think like again, like I think when you were as well talking about like what performance did for you, and like what this kind of perhaps intuitive way of doing it. It's not a thing of like, oh, I'm just giving up on concepts. I love concepts. Like, I love research. I don't believe that either. Something that perhaps I often find very hard to listen to when we talk about, like, let's say those categories of art practice, those that are conceptual and those that are process led. I often find, like, for one, process can be a concept. Concept and thinking is a process as well. The two are always married. They come in different forms each time, and I think to kind of realise that, not to kind of be bound maybe by a classification of what counts as either. You know, it just taps into that kind of feeling of like, what are we making art for? It's to actually discover something. Yeah. To discover something, you kind of really have to unlearn something else. As well. I think that's very true. And I think you can kind of see it in the work that, I know you were saying when I was talking to you previously, that these were all these murals. Are you referring to them as murals? I don't know what they are really. I kind of see them as part drawing, part painting, part collage. I guess now it's a mural-ish too. It's a bit of a hybrid really. I think, like, I was talking about this with someone the other day, and they were asking the same question. It's like, are they drawings? Are they paintings? Does it matter? I'm like, I think they're both. I think they're all these things in a way. They're painting. Is even a bit sculptural. I think the collage kind of lends itself to that as well. As it kind of unfurls like onto the floor, kind of a little bit off the wall as well. Things are kind of just like pinned like over. No, and you can see they're even creating their own shadows, like these shadowy figures, even where I'm standing now, where I'm sitting, you can see all the lovely shadows they're creating. But I think it's interesting because they once had backgrounds. They were done on paper, right? They did. Sometimes I think I've incorporated some of the backgrounds in them themselves. So I did these on like a very heavy duty paper, a watercolor paper. I think using print as well. It could handle a lot of water. Like, it's really, really heavy. It's kind of made for this kind of lots of pooling, lots of kind of like dragging of liquid and paint. And I I felt from my degree show work, I'd done charcoal. I started making charcoal drawings for this show when I was in studio, and they weren't really coming out. I was just trying to I was kind of approaching it in that same intuitive way with charcoal, but I'd done that already. They just weren't, I kind of couldn't really get it out.
It maybe felt like you were reproducing or something?
I felt like, like a bit of a machine, kind of like I wasn't really, I kind of knew what would happen, I'd get a kind of scribbly, figurative thing, or something like that. But through charcoal, it just, for that moment, I think it was just so close in proximity to my degree show. I think I felt a real need for a very drastic, kind of, not drastic, but maybe just a different sense of something. So
you needed something unexpected, I suppose. Like even, like, not to go back to the title of the show, but listening, you were clearly seeking something unknown, or that you weren't certain whether necessarily comfortable with. So it makes sense.
I needed something to respond to. I needed like a starting point of a kind of like, just kind of one thing to lead to another. And these can come from very unexpected places. Like it can come from just the smallest part, like that little tiny little shape there, very insignificant, not very exciting, but literally a very kind of small shape there. Then just kind of unfurling to these larger ones, but they all add up to this much bigger, kind of more complex thing, but at once are very simple and very bare, but there's something in it, and I don't know what it is that kind of stops me and tells me, yeah, that's it, that's done. But then I was kind of making them, I could see them on the page, but then on the page it was like, okay, they're kind of fixed in their position, they're not being seen and all, I just need to. So I started cutting them out just to kind of isolate the shapes, just so I could get a sense of what kind of shapes I was looking for. And I started with really small ones, so I just started cutting them up, kind of collaging them, having a bit of fun in my studio, playing with them, like almost turning my studio into a little bit of a kind of shadow theatre, kind of these cutouts. And just trying to establish that sense of kind of joy in the work again as well, because I feel like beginning that kind of breaks a lot of kind of rigid, kind of seriousness, where you start to kind of take the work a bit too seriously then, and then nothing kind of unexpected could happen. Like it was interesting when I started cutting them out and playing with them. I was like, oh my god, I'm having so much fun. Having a lot of fun. And I'm actually starting to kind of build relationships between really things that I didn't really think would work together. Like the fact that the black and the colour work kind of had that odd relationship. I almost feel like at once this kind of murky, seaweedy kind of like ink put like all this messy kind of like paint over it as well, and then this kind of very saturated then kind of pooling water. It's kind of interesting, like with this kind of murky unknown, it kind of almost makes the kind of the rich kind of saturated parts of these things kind of look a bit brighter as well, which is kind of interesting.
It does, and it's, at the core of it, it sounds like play has always been there. Like even from the videos that were taken by your mum of you as a child, playing with your shadow and interacting with your shadow, all the way to now, where for you the unpredictability and the spontaneity of being in studio and working with, whether it's a material that's unruly or a concept or an idea that you don't necessarily have nailed down yet, but there's always play, and that seems to be really important.
Definitely. Play, I think, is so, and I think a lot of people who study childhood development know this, is that play is so important. It is integral to our coexistence as a species, as humans. And I would argue it's actually so important that it kind of leaks itself into our coexistence with the world. I think it's that important. Play is a very serious activity. Yeah,
I think you mentioned Donald Winnicott, and I know you said your mom had looked into him, and I did a bit of research on him as well, so I was like, this sounds very, very cool. And I love your mum's work, so if she's researching someone, then I want to know about it.
Definitely, I'll give you a list.
But I was looking at it, I have to do proper reading, but I think he was saying something about that if a child is really well behaved in their youth, it's like they're over disciplined, and it can actually stunt creativity when they're older, because they almost it can lead to them developing like a false sense of self or something, that they're constantly appeasing something, so they can't actually freely discover themselves. So if you see kind of an unruly or misbehaved child, it's a good thing, because that means they're playing, that means they're experimenting, they're figuring it out, they're learning through experience. Whereas if you see like this military grade child, it's I think that's what he was arguing anyway, that it was actually a little bit unproductive difficult because they'll have to figure that out at some point, and that means it's going to be later in life. So a child that is engaging in play and being a little bit bold, it's actually a good thing. And I know we were both leash children.
I was a leash child.
Me also. I was also a leash child.
I loved it.
Next performance I did. So yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask you, I know you'd mentioned William Kentridge.
Oh yes.
He's probably, I would assume, one of your big inspirations.
Unfortunately, yes, I can't get away from him.
I have many artists like that myself.
I've been trying to work through my influence with Kentridge for so long, and I always find it, you know, when you're so influenced by an artist, it can be it's both so like exciting. It's like, oh, this gives me permission. Like, yes, drawing can be anything. It can go into any avenue. And when I saw Kentridge's work for the first time, like I just felt like, oh, it just gave me permission to like really push that kind of side of like that, the mark, the drawing, the moving image side of it. Then let the drawings culminate into an installation scale. But then also there's the kind of other side of it where you start to look too much at life through another artist's work and maybe another artist's lens. In a way, it's lovely and it's a great thing to feel, but it's also, I think, sometimes very challenging then to kind of like, okay, come away from it and then start to go on your own journey as well. Not that maybe that's a bit too critical on myself and other people maybe who feel that way, but I definitely find myself always thinking like, oh, I just want to trying to have my own voice as well and trying to develop my own process and ideas around making.
It's funny you say, because it's something I think about a lot as well. It's where's the line between I suppose copying someone or maybe mirroring them too much and then just actually expanding upon conversations, expanding the dialogues that they've started. And I think all art is recycled. I think we're all dealing with the same core themes
even if you
throughout
don't know
history.
it.
Absolutely, whether subconscious or not. And I think what's different is that each time an artist reproduces or reinterprets these themes, it's going through a unique sieve. It's a new time, it's a new zeitgeist, it's a new generation, and there's also then the individual experiences of that person. So like I have artists like that. I know Louise Bourgeois, Frida Kahlo, love. Anna Mendieta, Tracy Emin, like that's just a few of them, and then even like Irish artists, Alice Maher, Aideen Barry, Jessie Jones. Love. Like, there's so many of them, and I reference them, I research them, I read their books. Anya Phillips' book I was just reading there about performance art. Like they are integral to my practice. They are part of my practice.
Definitely.
But I think no matter what, when you make the work, it's totally unique. It's going through your own personal sieve of experiences.
Absolutely.
So it's always going to come out different. If we were to sit here and do the same theme with the same resources, the same research, everything, we would make two different bodies of work.
Completely.
And that's what's so special about art, and that's why
it's incredible.
I want to talk to artists. Yeah,
it's so fascinating.
Everyone has a unique perspective.
Yeah.
I was wondering, there's obviously William Kentridge. Was there any other artists that you were
so
kind of
many? I think for this show, so many. There were so many artists that I've loved. A lot of I actually share. I think a lot of the artists that you love. So Alice Maher is a big influence on me as well. She also does stop motion animation as well with drawing, which I love. They're brilliant. Also Aideen Barry, of course, and like for this show in particular, I think my three biggest influences rather, were Cara Walker's work.
Yeah,
Cara Walker's kind of like cutouts. Now hers are very kind of like you can tell they're the silhouettes of like figures, but they're gorgeous, and the negative space around them is just so really incredible. She also does like kind of works with shadow and kind of animations as well. She also does the stop motion using the cutouts, which I love. There's something, I think there's a lot of kind of similarities between maybe aesthetically, probably due to a lot of the subject matter between William Kentridge and Cara Walker, I think. I don't know why that seems to kind of be such an appeal for me. Probably does have something to do with subconscious me looking at my shadow when I was a kid, like that kind of silhouette ambiguity, that kind of those things that arrive in that kind of silhouetted cutout shape, or the kind of just blacked out shadow, kind of like in drawing or anything like that seems to kind of always come in. But Another one would be one that I love for the kind of very monstrous, kind of like a hybrid sense of it. And I think I feel like I haven't talked about a really key thing as well, which is shape-shifting, and the shapeshifter as a figure in my work that I kind of reference with someone else's work who really has that kind of sense of that hybrid shapeshifter. Wangechi Mutu.
I don't know.
Oh, her works.
Oh, her.
Yeah. Yeah, Wangechi Mutu, look her up.
I will look her up.
It's she does these really amazing collages. Nice. Really incredible, like collages, kind of painting as well, watercolors. They're very liquidy and very fluid. Her color palette's very kind of like pink and kind of brown and things like that. She also does like a lot of collage cutouts from like newspapers and things like that. A little bit similar to Kara Walker, but perhaps a bit more monstrous, I'd say. They're quite monstrous entities that she makes with them, that kind of unfurl as well through the gallery. And she does sculpture as well, which are really incredible. Again, with a lot of these hybrid beings. I think a lot of her work references a lot of mythology as well from aquatic beings as well, which is really cool. Yeah,
very cool.
It's very cool.
That kind of leads me, you might have already answered it, but to my final question, which is with reference to Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party. I wanted to ask everyone who I bring on, if you had to invite 3 artists, dead or alive, to a dinner party hosted by you, who would you invite? And this can just be for today, because I know it probably changes every day. But today, if you were to host that dinner party, which 3 artists, dead or alive, would you invite?
Oh, that's great. Willem de Kooning. Just because my dad loves him. Sorry, Billy. That was for Billy. Unlucky, I got to have dinner. Willem de Kooning. Have a chat with him about like big gestures or some big paint. Maybe steal all of his mad ideas with painting, I'd say. Who else would I invite? William Kentridge, of course, have to do that. I don't know if they'd get along. I'm sure they would.
That's the interesting thing with this. It's like, are you going to cause some disruptions? Like, who are you going to sit next to each other? Can you not invite someone because you're inviting someone else and, you know, they have a history? Or are you going to totally disregard that and have it be just like a hell dinner of like argument? It's going to be really peaceful, you know, these are all the considerations that have to come into it.
Definitely. And then Wangechi Mutu then, I'd say. Yeah, I'd say those would be the 3. I think those would be the 3 for now. So yeah, I think we've got a kind of good basis there.
That's a good answer. I'm still undecided on who I'm inviting, so I'll figure that out.
I feel like they'd all ask like, why are you asking us? We're so all unrelated to each other. But like, I think that's great.
I think it'd be a very interesting dinner.
Yeah, very interesting dinner.
Okay, well that's it. That's all I wanted to ask you for now. I'm sure I'll probably have you back on again at some point. But
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Danny.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I'll obviously link your...
Like and subscribe. Lara Quinn, everybody.
You heard it here from Danny, so you have to do it. No, but I'll link your website and your Instagram and stuff so people can find you, because I'm sure after this is only a taster into your work. There's so much more to it. So it's just a little conversation about a much broader practice, and I'm excited to see what you get up to. And you have a solo show coming up later this year.
I have a solo show coming up in August 21st. So yeah, I'm going to continue on. 12.
Absolutely. So, yeah, thanks, Danny.
Yeah. Happy days, mate. Thanks so much. I hope that was all right.